שתיים, שלוש, 1, 2, 3. זה ראיון מוקלט עם גברת הרטה סוהמי בתל אביב ב-2 במרץ 1967 על נושא הצלת ילדים מגרמניה לארצות הברית ולאנגליה לפני המלחמה. השיחה תתנהל באנגלית. Ms. Souhami, would you mind starting with a few biographical details about your training before you started working on the saving of children from Germany to the Western countries?
I made my examination in Berlin, in the Berlin Welfare School from the Social Democrats. After leaving school, I worked as a social worker in Westphalia, and after some time I went to Hamburg, Altona, to work there in a hospital as a social worker until the 1st of April 1933.
Yes. How did your activity in connection with the saving of children and youth take form? When did that start?
I started to work as a social worker from January 15th, 1936 until April 1st, 1938 for the province. I had to organize the entire work of the Jewish Welfare Department of our district and by appointment of the Board of Economic Assistance, and I was in charge of the vocational training and special retraining of numerous young people who had to prepare for their emigration. There was included the preparation for the youth aliyah groups and the transfer of children to be placed in the United States.
Good. And how did you come to or how did you organize your work at the time in Berlin? If you like.
Yeah. I had to submit application for children to be sent to the States. It started about 1936 to 1937. These applications were sent to the headquarters, so to the Jewish Welfare Board in Berlin.
That's the Zentralvorfallstelle?
This was the Reichsvertretung der Juden in Deutschland. After this time, after 1937, on April 38, I took up the post as a secretary for the emigration of children at the board of the German Jewry in Berlin.
May I just ask you?
It was wrong, a bit wrong.
Now, before we move to your work in Berlin, how did you proceed with the applicants in the province in Westphalia? Did you have contact with Berlin and they told you about the possibilities, or did you send in applications? How did it work?
At first, of course, we were told by Berlin to submit applications, and we had to fill in forms.
Those were applications for what?
For children to send to the United States.
To the United States. And did they know at that time about how many possibilities they had and what the requirements were? Or?
Yes. It was an agreement with the welfare office in New York. I have forgotten the exact name of the organization in New York.
It was a Jewish organization?
It was a Jewish organization specially set up for receiving children to the States.
And that was before they had places to send them. They wanted to hear from you first who the applicants were, and then they would arrange visas, or did they have visas and they asked you to send in a suitable candidate?
We had, it was an agreement to send 120 children a year to the States.
Each year?
Each year.
From 1936 on?
About.
Yes.
We had to fill in forms when we had found suitable children to be sent to the States. These forms were very extensive. There were questions about psychological questions as also practical questions, and we had to know the backgrounds of the family. It was a very thorough work because the welfare office in New York wanted to place the children in the very proper place they suited in.
Mm-hmm. Was this a questionnaire which was made up by the welfare office, or was that a questionnaire of the American consulate?
Not from the welfare office in the States. It were pages and pages to be filled in. Even we had to write how the children slept, what they were dreaming, what they were eating, how they were eating, and what their parents did, and how was the education, how was the approach of the parents to the children, vice versa.
Now, were all the applicants that you sent in, were they all accepted to go, or were they then chosen by Berlin or chosen by New York?
They were first, I am sure, chosen by Berlin because not everybody was able to fill in a proper way these applications. You had to think in a psychological way how the United States, the welfare office, our Jewish welfare office, would understand this in their way.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the number of 120 a year. Do you remember how many eventually went to the United States?
I have forgotten. I do not remember anymore.
All right, and how did your work develop after that?
After that, I was asked by our head office in Berlin to start working with them. And I went there in April 1938. I worked first only for the placement of children to the United States until...
And what was your function then? Did you still receive applications from the provinces, or were those applications from Berlin itself?
No.
Or how did that...
I received the application from all the provinces all over Germany. And I had to get through the application to see whether they were properly filled, whether we were able to send this application to the States, whether they, attached to these applications, there had to be pictures of the children, certificates, and the social worker of this province who had sent in the application had to write her own evaluation about the case. This had to be put in proper order until we could send it to the States.
And then it was the welfare officer who chose the children, and they advised you, and then you had to apply for visas, or how did that function?
I think there was an agreement with the United States for not for an individual visa. I guess it was a collective visa, and we received all the papers from the States.
I see. And how did the children travel? They traveled by groups or large
We
groups?
had our company, our we had transport leaders.
The transport leaders, that was to England. Was that the way
Also,
it went to America?
Yes. As fewer children went, I think I remember that one transport leader was enough. And we had already specialized these transport leaders for the work to bring children to the States.
And by how large groups did they leave? Did they leave?
As far as I remember, there were very small groups, let's say 10 children or 20. I don't think there were more children.
By groups of 10?
The most, but this is...
And it was sort of spread out over the year. You say there was a quota of 120.
If we had enough children, then they were sent by boat. And I think everything was paid by New York.
That's what I wanted to ask.
I remember only, I'm not so certain.
Were they were usually children whose parents were still alive?
Yes.
So they weren't really adopted in families there.
They were not adopted. No, I think even this was a condition that they were not adopted.
Do you know anybody who might remember the figures of how many, let's say, during the whole period, how many children got to New York?
It might be that the head of our office, Kate Rosenheim, might remember, and she can be contacted as we have her address.
Good, I shall write to her. Was it only to the United States, or was it to any other countries in America? Were there any sent to Canada or to South America?
To Canada, I don't think so, nor do I think to South America. We had another worker in our office. She dealt with sending children to different other countries when we received from these other countries, from their women's organization, invitations to that they were prepared to accept children.
So the initiative was taken from the outside countries?
I guess yes.
And later you dealt with the emigration to England, I understand.
Yes, after November 38, after the so-called Crystal Night, our activity started in earnest. We worked even first as our offices were closed by the Nazis. We worked shortly after at night in our homes. I think it was in Miss Rosenheim's home that we had telephone calls direct to England.
Do you remember who took the initiative in England?
Mrs. Lola Hahn-Warburg was the director for the children's movement in the Bloomsbury House in London. Her secretary was Mrs. Exina.
And how did that function? How did you
Afterwards,
select the children, and how did you?
Yeah, our offices were open for the purpose that we could work for the emigration of the children. We worked first
at... What age children were those? Do you remember?
It was children from about 6 to 18. That was a condition that they should not be over 18.
Was there any age limit as far as the children to the United States is concerned?
Most of the children were in the age of teenagers.
Teenagers.
Yes.
And did they come from any? I'm going back a minute to the United States. Were they children from a special social background? Did they insist on people with certain income or certain, let's say, bourgeois or poorer people, or did they specify from religious homes or non-religious homes?
No, it was children from all kinds of family, from bourgeois family and poor family. The stress was that there was an emergency, that children had to be sent away to save them if the parents were in danger. Of course, there were also cases from very poor parents who had lost their livelihood through the Nazi persecution, yes. It was, for instance, in Westphalia, there was a large number of Jewish families who worked on the land and were selling cattle. And in these small places, they had very early to suffer under the Nazis and were not able anymore to make any business. Such children were also taken into consideration to be sent away.
And would you say that, I'd like to ask what the relationship was to the candidates for youth aliyah, whether Zionist families would rather ask for their children to go with youth aliyah and non-Zionists would apply to the Reichsvertretung for immigration to the Western countries, or? It
was not so divided, because we were in a very difficult position. The parents were in danger, and they didn't mind where they have been sent. Of course, there were some families whose children were very enthusiastic about going to Palestine at this time, and we had in Germany several hashra places I visited, and I saw them going away in groups. It was sometimes very touchy when all these youngsters left, and we had a very nice contact to them. And we helped them also through the Winterhilfe. We supplied them with money in their places, in their hashara places.
Okay. And would you say that you dealt more than with children who were not accepted for youth aliyah, either because they weren't the right age or because they weren't suitable for the conditions in Palestine, because they were very strict in choosing?
Well, you see, as we got the application when I was in the province from the heads of the Jewish community, then they knew already what kind of application they have to send. So we had not to think whether yes or no, use aliyah or not. We got the application and we went through these applications to see whether there were fitting, they were in order to be submitted to the headquarters.
I see. All right, maybe we will continue now about the work to England. You explained to me about how it was organized from there. Now, you had many applications. How did you choose the children? Did you have the possibility of sending as many children as wanted to go, or were you limited and did you have to choose from them?
To England we were not limited at all. We just had to work out as many applications as possible to send to England, to the Bloomsbury House. And in the beginning of our work after November 38, children, the first transports were taken without having any homes organized for the children. They were put into camps. It was near the coast on the channel. And there were some children camps where then the prospective foster parents came and choose their children. Later, the Bloomsbury House told us, as it cannot be anymore done in this way, I guess it was difficult to run such camps, and further, I guess that the government did not permit to running camps. I cannot tell you exactly how it happened. I only know that from a certain time on, only children who had already a home, a foster home, either that people applied to the Bloomsbury House or the parents in Germany had their own connections in England and supplied us with the guarantees.
With relatives or friends?
Yes. Sometimes they just wrote to someone in England, it happened to accept their children. And then we worked only on this basis to have a guarantee for a child. And then we prepared the forms and the attached certificates, health certificate, and all kinds of other certificates.
You say there were an unlimited number, but yet at that moment, I understand you were limited by the number of foster homes that were available?
This was a difficulty, yes. Yes.
And how did you select the children? And did you have enough for all the children who were candidates for leaving, or were there some which you could not send?
Yeah. In cases where there was not a foster home, I think we are, as far as I can remember, that we called on in the Bloomsbury House whether they had homes. But I think in general we had always enough homes to send about every month about 100 to 150 children in a transport.
There was a transport about every month? About every month. Yes. And would you say that sort of satisfied the need because there weren't more parents who wanted to send their children, or I cannot quite visualize how many applications you had, or did people only apply once they knew already that they had the possibility?
We had to deal with thousands and thousands of applications. We were even not able to read all the letters we received from all over the country. At nights we were sitting on the floor to order the letters we received. We could not read all the letters. We ordered them at first according to towns where from the letters came. And we had also hours where we received people, and when they complained, yes, we have sent you the letters, we have sent you the forms, we have sent you the pictures, why don't you answer? Then we looked for the letters from this certain town to see whether amongst these letters was this special letter. And this was, of course, not a proper way to work, but we were overwhelmed and overflooded. And although we had many volunteers, it could just not be done otherwise.
It was a shortage of people to work efficiently, or it was just the circumstances?
The circumstances, the shortage would not have been. Of course, you can only have a certain amount of people who have some understanding. You have to organize also your people to do the right work. And if you are only one person, there is a limit to how you can work out your plan.
So let's say you managed to send a certain number, so the number wasn't actually set by the number of visas available, it was set by your ability to handle the immigration of those children.
Yes,
is that what
yes,
correct?
about,
what I understand?
yes, yes.
That is, you even had more applications than you could handle, and possibly you could have handled, or you could have gotten into England more children if you had been able to process more. It was just the physical possibility of
I do not
sending
know
them.
whether the number was above 4,000. I remember that we have sent 4,000 children. Whether the government of England was prepared to accept more, this I do not know anymore.
You had they allotted 4,000 visas and you sent 4,000.
It is difficult to say.
It's difficult to say, I understand. That, when you say 4,000, that is till September 39, I guess, till the war broke out?
Yes, about. But I left with 180 children on a transport on the boat from Bremen here, and after I had left, this was in June 39.
Yes.
There were still a few transports until the war broke out.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 to 3 transports at least had were taken to England.
You accompanied a transport and you did not return to Germany. Was that the usual way, or did the people who accompanied usually have to come back to Germany?
They had usually to come back, but I had an immigration visa to England, and therefore I had asked to accompany this transport to end my work in this way.
Mm-hmm. And how did it usually work with the, how would you call it, the convoyer or the accompanier?
The transport leaders.
The transport leaders, yes. How were they chosen? And
they were usually were youth leaders or teachers.
Yes.
Who had, of course, they had to have a certain understanding how to tackle this transport, because many difficulties were involved in such
I'd like
a transport.
To hear a bit. Could you give me let's say, a description of maybe one transport, how you advised the people that that they'd received it, and how the children gathered and how they left? Could you maybe give me a description of how it functioned?
We were given by the government, or it was perhaps the Berlin, the municipality. No, I don't know. By the Nazi officials, we were given a station on a certain day when other trains did not leave from this station.
It wasn't always from Berlin?
From Berlin.
Always from
in
Berlin. Yes.
There the parents brought their children, and we were given a hall where we were collecting the children, reading from a list all the names, seeing whether they had submitted all necessary documents. And then the children were brought to the train. The parents were not allowed to accompany their children to the platform. And there were many very tragic scenes when the parents said goodbye to the children. They knew it was forever, almost. Then, as the train went through different stations in Berlin, sometimes we could see that the parents went to another station to wave goodbye to their children. And I remember on my transport, even a mother of a little, very sweet boy managed to get into the train and she went almost until Bremen. But she left her child while the child was playing with some other children and did not tell the child goodbye, since it was a very small little boy. And another boy from the same town took care of this child.
Were there many groups of brothers and sisters in the transports?
There were often brothers and sisters, yes. And when the transport leaders told us that they encountered many difficulties on the border, the Nazi official threatened if they had taken anything what was not allowed, for instance jewelry, it was sometimes sewn in their clothes, then the whole transport would be in danger. Therefore, the parents were always again and again told not to give their children anything which was not permitted.
Did it ever happen that they stopped the transport? No, they just...
A transport was not stopped, but they threatened, and they felt always relieved when they, for instance, entered Holland and said, now, thank goodness, now we have friendly people in front of us and not anymore these barbarous Nazis.
How did the children react to all these preparations and departures and...
Of course, it depended how their background was, whether there was a great attachment to the parents or whether the attachment was looser. I was only able once to see the transport to the end when I myself emigrated, and I went it was a big transport of 180 children.
What ages? From 6 to 18?
Yes. And we took them to a big boat, a German boat from the Lloyd in Bremen. There I could see the different...
but the parents did not see them off in Bremen? The parents
no,
saw them
they were not
Berlin
permitted, and the Nazis were very strict in this respect. When one or the other slipped through, that was just a very rare incident which should not happen, but it seems some were lucky to do it.
Do you remember at all what the legal procedure was? Did the children have an individual passport, or did they have, was it a collective passport?
I think it was a collective passport, not individual passport.
And was there any specification that they should be children from German nationality or children without nationality? Do you remember whether there was any...
I am sure that also children without a nationality from Polish parents also went with...
were included?
Yes,
it was
I
not
think so.
Specified.
I only remember that from Austria they had their own organization, and they worked in a different way.
But which way did they travel from Austria? Through Germany?
They must have also gone through Germany.
But they had nothing to do with your setup?
No, we had sometimes, I remember, contact. Perhaps that sometimes, yes, children joined our children, but in detail I do not remember. I only know that we had contact with the welfare office in Vienna.
Who actually decided how many of these immigration visas to England went to Germany and how many went to Austria? Was that decided in England?
In England.
And were there departures from other towns in Germany that did not go through Berlin, or was everything centralized in Berlin?
Everything was centralized.
There were none, let's say, that left from Köln or from the Rhineland without going first through Berlin?
No,
it was
centralized.
And was there any problem of financing the trips?
No, the Reichsvertretung der Juden paid for the transport.
And were there any specification about the equipment that they had to take along, or any limitations on what they could take?
There were definitely limitations that they could only take their own clothing and what they needed. Mm-hmm. They could not take a lot of luggage.
All right. Is there anything more you would like to? You say that everything was centralized, but was there, for instance, any, let's say, the religious organizations who tried to do anything on their own initiative, or was that also through the Reichsvertretung? Was there any problem, let's say, of religious children and not religious children?
Yes, I remember that I was told in the very beginning, when children were sent to camps in England, that children did not want on Shabbat to do anything. They had not to do anything. No, it was about kosher food. That they, some children made many difficulties and did not want to eat. And the chief rabbi of England gave an order that it was an emergency, and in emergencies one can eat all kinds of food. Mm-hmm. Some children accepted it, but there were even few who did not. What then happened to them, I cannot tell anymore.
But at your end in Berlin, was there, let's say, any quota that so many religious children, so many non-religious children had to be taken?
I don't think
you didn't
so.
Take that into consideration?
We just took what when there was a call of emergency, yes. And it was the main point which we accepted, the emergency.
The emergency of the family.
Of the family
they have
as
to get
such.
This child out.
Yes.
And in that case, let's say if there was an emergency, then all the children of that particular family were taken at one time, I guess.
If they had the necessary homes.
Uh-huh. And did it happen, for instance, that foster homes in England took more than one child, if there were, let's say, 2 or 3 brothers or children? You don't know.
I don't know anymore. I've forgotten many details as it's such a long time past.
Yes. I guess you've done a lot of other work in the meantime.
Yes, I did work in the camps in Germany for the joint. I was in Munich. After the war, I went to Germany. First, I was in the civil censorship, and then I took over work from the joint, and I worked in for the camps, for the people who went through these camps in Germany.
But when you arrived in England with this transport of children, did you continue to work with refugee children in England?
Yes, after a certain time I was in charge of children homes for refugee children from the Bloomsbury House. I worked in Birmingham for a while, and then I was asked to take over the home in Cambridge. We had from the university college, we had such a home since many students had gone to the army. They were from the Peterhouse College was a house, a very old house was empty, and the children's movement in connection with the office in Cambridge took over such a house, and there I was the matron of this house to care for these refugee children.
What particular difficulties would you say came across this work, the atmosphere and the pressure? Maybe yes. You can probably describe it better than we can even imagine it.
After November 38, we worked under a very great pressure. As I said before, we had so many applications. We had not always the proper workers to help us, although we had wonderful people who volunteered. We had even not the chances, as we worked through from morning to night, to go to eat, because many restaurants had written on their windows forbidden for Jews. So some of our volunteers came with sausages and bread and something to drink, and we sat on our tables and had a few minutes of rest to go on working again. And in November 38, the Nazis blocked our offices for a short while.
Yes. So actually this very intensive work was from November till June when you left. That's a period of about 8 months. And before that, the emigration to the United States was still on a slower pace.
A very slower pace, yes.
And even it took less children into consideration.
Right, yes.
Do you feel that anything could have been done if they would have started earlier, or was that beyond the possibility? I mean, circumstances didn't demand it at that time.
Circumstances did demand at that time. Also, in the beginning, of course, in let's say until 36, many people did not believe that there would be a danger, and so the whole affair went slower from both sides, from those who later sent the application and from our side who did not receive so many applications. Mostly parents thought that they would emigrate together with their children. If they want to emigrate, I had a case even in my own family. They thought to emigrate. Then the father was taken to concentration camp, and they came to me to ask for. Then at this time I had to tell them they have to find foster homes. But the mother came a while later and said, no, we cannot part from our children. Luckily, they could emigrate to Argentine.
But putting the responsibility on the parents to find a foster home, wasn't that making it very difficult for them? I mean, that sort of selected people who had contacts abroad, didn't it?
Yes, it was, but I think that England demanded such a way of accepting children that they had no choice.
Let's say there was a very simple family that had no contacts in England. Did, for instance, your office, was it in a position to suggest to them to write here or there, or give them any possibility of contacts there?
I do not properly remember. I always thought of other resources. This is also my way of thinking, to find out how can one help.
Yes.
And I do not know whether I was able to find sometimes. I only remember at one occasion when I think more than 100 boys were taken to concentration camp.
From where? From Berlin?
Not all over the country.
Yes.
And they had reached the age of 18 or almost, or were a little over. And we frantically telephoned to London, to the Bloomsbury House. You have to take these children. They are in danger. Please do what you can. And we wrote letters, and we did not stop asking for this permission. Then they agreed to, and when the boys were a little over 18, then we changed their birthday and pressed to them to remember that they were born at a certain date, which was convenient.
Now, they could be released from the camps if they had a paper that they were going to emigrate, is that correct?
I think they were already released, but perhaps the whole family was threatened that they have to leave, otherwise they have to enter again the camp. And I still remember when we saw the pictures of these boys, of very often of good families, because the Nazis at this time had took a special pleasure to put in concentration camp rich people. And when the boys came out, their whole expression looked so different, bitter, and with their hair cut off. It was very touching to see this difference which happened in a very short time.
Is there anything else you would like to
I don't
tell me or remember about the work in general?
What else could I tell you?
Did you have any contact with the International Red Cross or with the Red Cross in Germany or with any church bodies? Or was it only with Jewish organizations?
We had only the contact with a Jewish organization.
And do you feel that the Reichsvertretung there in Germany
it was later the Reichsvereinigung. Later it had changed the name Reichsvereinigung.
Whether it created a sufficiently good contact or way of communication with the people who were dispersed so that they knew where to go or how to apply for these immigration possibilities?
I think it was really very excellent that we had very fine people as the heads of departments, and like Dr. Lotan, at those time Dr. Lubinsky and Dr. Epstein, who unfortunately died in concentration camp. All of these people, and Rabbi Leo Beck was the president. It was amazing how well organized all this was, and in such a short time that you knew what to do, and the right thing, as far as one could say the right thing, was done. It was such a warm cooperation from all the sides.
And in fact, the Germans at that time were interested in the Jews leaving, but
yes.
At the same time they made difficulties for you, or
yes. From the other side, it was not organized, and nothing was logic. Yes. It just as it happened from one Nazi official to another, everyone would have thought something else, either to press or to make difficulties. This was, we had to understand, to try out how to understand these things and how to react immediately to their actions. Which
didn't have really logic in them. So
yes.
So did it happen that some transport leaders left and did not come back, and did that cause trouble?
I know the head of our department was very much afraid that it could cause trouble, and every transport leader was told, please come back, do us a favor, even if you come back only for 1 or 2 days, but return not to endanger our transport.
Did it happen that any of your workers had to leave because they themselves were in danger?
I don't remember that. Because of that someone had to leave. Many, of course, took the advantage to go to England, to prepare for them, to be accepted, to get it was not said a certificate, a permit to return to England, and we gladly helped them to take this advantage.
Now, you mentioned Mrs. Springer, I think, who
yes.
was the one who sent children to other Western countries aside from England. On what basis did you decide which children went to which country?
I think it was so that we received offers from the countries for children of a certain age, or there were so many places. I think there was an orphanage in Paris. They were prepared. And from the application we received, might be that Miss Springer went through and looked whether there were suitable children for this certain place.
If it were to an institution like an orphanage, would you sort of try and take children from an orphanage in Germany who formed a group already and to transfer the whole group, or did that not play any role?
I don't know anymore. I know of a Jewish orphanage in Paderborn, but I think they were sent to use Aliyah.
And for instance, children who went to Holland or to Sweden, you don't know on what basis they were chosen, or?
I have forgotten. Of course I knew, but in the meantime I've forgotten.
Yes, and do you think that aside from this organized children transport, were there also on the side individuals or smaller organizations who tried to do things of that kind, or were conditions too difficult, or did you try to avoid that?
We didn't. I don't think we tried to avoid it. I think that perhaps from a very religious parts, there was in Hessen, the religious Jews were living in near some towns in Hessen. Might be that they organized on their own something.
Because as far as Vienna is concerned, one person told me that there was sort of a multiplication of what you would say partisan, not the professional, official.
Yes.
Yes. I would like to hear
this I remembered, but I didn't think it fits in.
No, I would like to know.
I know that we sometimes got a bit angry about Vienna because they did not do it in such an organized form as we did it. Miss Rosenheim was such a well-organized person that she liked that everything was done in the very proper way. And Vienna did it more in a way, a partisanish way. This I remember faintly, that sometimes we got angry about their way of working out.
And this is maybe another more of a human interest side of it. Did you afterwards did the parents get any news through you from what happened to the children?
For England, I don't remember. I remembered at the time when I worked for sending children to the States. Very often parents came to us. They had no news from their children, and through the committee in New York, we tried to trace the children and ask them to answer. And I remember once an answer that a boy got very independent. He went to the southern states of America and said he has something more important to do. But this was a very rare occasion.
Well, of course, this was quite a trauma for the children, and
right.
Some reacted in a way that they didn't want to correspond.
Yes.
How was your relationship usually with the parents? Were they very demanding, or were they understanding of the difficulties that you had in organizing this emigration?
Of course, they had so much fear, the parents, who had encountered very difficult situations through the Nazis. Of course, they were coming demanding, and they were filling the halls before our offices in masses. That I remember one time I went out and was standing on a chair to be seen and asked them and pleaded to let us work in order to be able to send their children away. And then we had, as we had volunteers, we set up a special room on the entrance on the ground floor where a person was to receive the people and to hear what they wanted, and when it was necessary, then they were permitted to see us workers.
Anyhow, I understand that on the whole this was a very difficult...
Yes, it was very difficult.
Very difficult job.
But but still you had a feeling that you achieved something. You had, although you worked under such a pressure, a good feeling. Whatever you could do, you had done.
All right, I think we'll stop here, and if I have any other questions when I read it, then I'll ask them in writing, and I hope
I will
you'll
answer.
be able to go over the transcript of it. Thank you very much.